The old courthouse stood tall and imposing on that cold Monday morning. Its marble steps, worn from years of footsteps, led to a fate that would shake an entire city. Sarah Thompson, a 35-year-old black mother of three, walked up those steps with her court-appointed lawyer, her hands trembling but her head held high. Inside Courtroom 7B, the air felt heavy and cold. Sarah sat straight-backed in her chair, wearing her best navy blue dress, the one she usually saved for Sunday church. Her tired eyes showed the strain of 3 months in county jail, waiting for this day. The small bottle of prescription pills found in her car without a label that brought her here, even though she tried to explain they belonged to her elderly mother. Judge William Harrison entered the courtroom at exactly 9:00 a.m. Everyone rose as he walked to his bench, his black robe flowing behind him like a dark shadow. At 63, he had served on this bench for 15 years, and his reputation for being strict was well known throughout Jefferson County. What wasn't openly discussed, but widely whispered about, were his unusually harsh sentences for minorities. The prosecutor, a young man named David Reynolds, presented a case that seemed routine. Simple possession, no intent to distribute. Similar cases typically resulted in probation or, at most, a few months in county jail. Reynolds himself appeared uncomfortable as he went through the motions, his voice lacking the usual force he brought to more serious cases. Sarah's public defender, Mark Wilson, did his best with limited time and resources. He spoke about Sarah's clean record, her volunteer work at the local food bank, and her role as the primary caregiver for her 3 children, Michael, 14, Lisa, 11, and James, 8. He explained how she worked 2 jobs, morning shifts at the local diner and evening work as a cleaning supervisor at the city hospital. "Your Honor," Wilson said, his voice echoing in the quiet courtroom, "Mrs. Thompson is a pillar of her community. The pills in question were her mother's heart medication. While she should have kept them in their original container, this was a simple mistake, not a crime deserving of harsh punishment." Judge Harrison's face remained stone-cold throughout the defense's presentation. His pale blue eyes never showed warmth as he looked down at Sarah from his elevated bench. The few spectators in the courtroom, mostly law students and other people waiting for their cases, could feel something was different about this hearing. When it came time for Sarah to speak, she stood with dignity. "Your Honor, I know I made a mistake," she said, her voice clear and steady. "But my children need me. My mother needs me. I learned my lesson, and I promise you'll never see me in this courtroom again." The judge's response started with a long, uncomfortable silence. He shuffled papers on his desk, removed his glasses, and cleaned them slowly with a white handkerchief. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a chill that made everyone in the courtroom shiver. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, emphasizing each word, "this court has seen too many excuses, too many promises of reform. The law must be upheld, and examples must be made." He paused, putting his glasses back on. "Taking into consideration the evidence presented and your apparent lack of respect for the law, I hereby sentence you to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The courtroom erupted in shocked gasps. Sarah's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The sentencing guidelines for this offense." Silence. Judge Harrison's gavel crashed down. "One more word, Mr. Wilson, and you'll be held in contempt. Bailiff, remove the prisoner." Sarah stood frozen, her mind unable to process what had just happened. The bailiff approached her, handcuffs ready. As the cold metal closed around her wrists, she finally broke down, her quiet sobs echoing through the stunned courtroom. Even the prosecutor looked shocked, shuffling his papers nervously and avoiding eye contact with everyone. Law students in the gallery frantically wrote notes, knowing they were witnessing something unprecedented and deeply wrong. As Sarah was led away, her last words echoed through the courtroom. "Please, someone call my children's school. They're waiting for me to pick them up today." Judge Harrison stood up and left the bench without another word, his robe flowing behind him as he disappeared through the door to his chambers. He didn't see the tears streaming down Sarah's face, or the look of disgust on the court reporter's face, or the way the bailiff gently helped Sarah walk, clearly uncomfortable with what he had just witnessed. Outside the courthouse, dark clouds gathered, as if nature itself was responding to the grave injustice that had just occurred within those walls. None of the people leaving the courthouse that morning knew that this verdict would soon set off a chain of events that would shake their city to its very foundation. Mayor James Mitchell sat in his office on the 15th floor of City Hall, reviewing budget proposals for the new community center. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows, casting long shadows across his mahogany desk. At 40, he was one of the youngest mayors in the city's history, and his progressive policies had earned him high approval ratings. His secretary's voice crackled through the intercom, interrupting his concentration. "Mr. Mayor, you need to see this. Channel 7 News is running a breaking story about a sentencing at the courthouse." James reached for the remote and turned on the wall-mounted TV. His coffee cup crashed to the floor as he saw Sarah's face on the screen. The news ticker at the bottom read, "Local mother sentenced to life for minor drug offense." His hands began to shake. Few people knew that Sarah Thompson was actually Sarah Mitchell, his wife of 12 years. They had kept their marriage private to protect their children and to allow Sarah to live a normal life away from political scrutiny. They lived in different houses during the week, meeting only on weekends at their lake house, where they could be a regular family. "Cancel all my meetings," he ordered through the intercom, his voice struggling to stay steady. "And get me District Attorney Chen on the phone immediately." As he waited for the call, James paced his office, loosening his tie. Their careful plan to keep their marriage private now felt like a terrible mistake. He hadn't even known about Sarah's arrest. She must have kept it from him to protect his political career, just as they had agreed years ago if anything ever happened. The mayor stopped at the window, looking down at the city he governed. Memories flooded his mind: their secret wedding on a quiet beach, the birth of their children, weekend barbecues at the lake house, and quiet nights planning their future. All of it now threatened by one judge's racist decision. His private phone buzzed, a text from Michael, their oldest son. "Dad, something's happened to Mom. They're saying it's on the news. What's going on?" Before he could reply, District Attorney Rachel Chen's call came through. "James," she said, skipping formal greetings, "I just heard. This is completely irregular. Harrison has gone too far this time." "Rachel," James's voice was tight with emotion, "I need you to understand something. Sarah Thompson, she's my wife." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. What?" Rachel finally managed. "How is that possible? We've worked together for 3 years." "We kept it private to protect our family," James explained, sinking into his chair. "But now I have to go public. I can't let her spend 25 years in prison for carrying her mother's heart medication in the wrong bottle." Rachel's legal mind was already working. This changes everything. Harrison has no idea he just sentenced the mayor's wife to life in prison. The press will have a field day when they find out. But more importantly, this level of sentencing for a first-time, minor offense. James, this could expose years of his discriminatory practices. A knock at the door interrupted them. James's chief of staff, Tom Wilson, entered with a stack of papers. "Sir, we got reporters gathering in the lobby. Someone leaked that you canceled all your meetings after the Thompson sentencing. They're asking questions." James straightened his tie and stood up. In that moment, he wasn't just a worried husband. He was a mayor preparing for battle. "Rachel, start reviewing Harrison's past cases. I want every instance of racial bias documented. Tom, call a press conference for 5 p.m. today. It's time everyone knew the truth." As his team sprang into action, James opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small photo. It showed him Sarah and their children at the lake house last summer, all smiling, happy, and free. He touched Sarah's face in the picture gently. "I'm going to make this right," he whispered. "I promise." The afternoon sun continued to shine through the windows of City Hall, but storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. In just a few hours, Mayor James Mitchell would step up to a podium and shock the city with a truth that would set in motion events none of them could predict. In her cell at the county jail, Sarah had no idea that her husband was about to risk everything: his career, their privacy, their carefully built life, to save her from a justice system that had failed her. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward 5 p.m., each second bringing them closer to a moment that would change everything. District Attorney Rachel Chen sat at her desk late into the night, surrounded by stacks of case files, The soft glow of her desk lamp cast shadows on the walls as she reviewed Judge Harrison's previous rulings. Her small office on the third floor of the courthouse felt more like a war room now. "This can't be a coincidence," she muttered, marking another troubling case with a yellow sticky note. Her assistant, Tom Parker, had helped her pull every case Judge Harrison had presided over in the last 5 years. The pattern they were discovering was disturbing. In case after case, the numbers told a clear story. Black defendants received sentences that were 3 to 4 times longer than white defendants for the same crimes. Hispanic defendants faced similar treatment. The disparity was so obvious that Rachel wondered how nobody had noticed it before. She picked up her coffee cup, only to find it empty for the third time that night. As she stood to refill it, her phone buzzed with a text from Mayor Mitchell. "Any progress?" Rachel typed back quickly. "Found 47 cases so far, all showing clear bias. Meeting tomorrow at 8 a.m. The response came immediately. "I'll be there." Just then, Tom rushed into her office, holding a thick folder. His usually neat tie was loose, and his sleeves were rolled up from hours of digging through old records. "Miss Chen, you need to see this," he said, placing the folder on her desk. "I found Judge Harrison's records from his private practice days, before he became a judge." Rachel opened the folder and started reading. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents. Before becoming a judge, Harrison had represented several organizations known for their discriminatory practices. He had even written legal opinions supporting segregation in private schools. "There's more," Tom said, pulling out several newspaper clippings. In 1985, he was part of a law firm that tried to block the construction of a black church in his neighborhood. The case was dismissed, but his name is all over the paperwork. Rachel sat back in her chair, processing this information. "This goes deeper than we thought. It's not just about Sarah Thompson's case anymore. This is about 15 years of systematic discrimination from the bench." She picked up her phone and called Judge Martinez, the head of the Judicial Review Board. Despite the late hour, he answered on the second ring. "David, I'm sorry to call so late, but this can't wait. We have evidence of long-term judicial misconduct by Judge Harrison. I need an emergency hearing." While she talked, Tom continued sorting through files, occasionally passing her sticky notes with important details. On her computer screen, a spreadsheet showed the growing list of cases where Harrison's sentences deviated significantly from state guidelines, always harsher for minorities. After hanging up, Rachel walked to her office window. The city lights twinkled below, and somewhere out there, Sarah Thompson was spending her first night in prison, away from her children, all because of one judge's prejudice. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. A young clerk, Jessica Wong, entered carrying another box of files. "Ms. Chen, I found these in the basement archives. They're Judge Harrison's cases from his first year on the bench." Rachel nodded tiredly but gratefully. "Put them with the others. And Jessica, thank you for staying late." As Jessica left, Rachel's phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. Mayor Mitchell to make unprecedented personal statement tomorrow regarding Thompson case. She knew James was taking a huge risk by going public about his marriage to Sarah. But as she looked at the mountains of evidence piling up in her office, she knew it was the right move. This wasn't just about one case anymore. It was about justice itself. Tom appeared at her door again. "Should we go home? It's almost midnight." Rachel shook her head, picking up another file. "Not yet. Sarah Thompson doesn't get to go home tonight. Neither do all the other people Harrison wrongly sentenced. The least we can do is keep working." She turned back to her desk, determined to build a case that would not only free Sarah, but expose 15 years of judicial corruption. Outside her window, the night grew deeper, but inside her office, the light stayed on, illuminating the path toward justice. Tomorrow would bring Mayor Mitchell's revelation and the media storm that would follow. But tonight, in a quiet office filled with paper trails of injustice, Rachel Chen and her team were laying the groundwork for a case that would shake the entire judicial system. The City Hall press room buzzed with energy at 4:45 p.m. Reporters from every local station and major network filled the seats, their cameras ready. None of them knew why Mayor James Mitchell had called this emergency press conference, but rumors were flying about its connection to the shocking Thompson sentencing. James stood behind the stage, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. His chief of staff, Tom Wilson, reviewed the prepared statement with him one last time. The mayor's hands shook slightly as he held the paper, thinking about Sarah spending her second night in prison. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Tom asked quietly. "Once you make this announcement, there's no going back. Your private life, your children's lives, everything will change." James looked at the wedding ring he now wore openly on his finger, usually kept hidden in his pocket during public appearances. "Sarah's worth it. The truth is worth it." At exactly 5 p.m., Mayor Mitchell walked to the podium. Camera flashes lit up the room like lightning. He gripped the sides of the podium, looked directly into the main camera, and began speaking. "Good evening. Today, I stand before you not just as your mayor, but as a husband and father." He paused, his voice growing stronger. "Sarah Thompson, who was sentenced to life in prison yesterday by Judge William Harrison, is my wife." The room erupted in gasps and exclamations. Reporters jumped to their feet, shouting questions. Camera flashes intensified. James raised his hand for silence. "For 12 years, we have kept our marriage private to protect our 3 beautiful children and to allow Sarah to live a normal life away from politics. That privacy has now become a weapon used against her." He pulled out a family photo from his pocket and held it up. "This is our family. Sarah is not just case number 47,892 in Judge Harrison's courtroom. She is a loving mother, a dedicated community volunteer, and yes, the First Lady of this city." From the back of the room, District Attorney Rachel Chen watched the chaos unfold. She held a thick folder of evidence about Harrison's past cases, ready for the question she knew would come. "Judge Harrison's sentence is not just an attack on my wife," James continued, his voice rising with controlled anger. "It is a symptom of a deeper problem in our justice system, a problem of bias and discrimination that has gone unchecked for far too long." At the county jail, inmates and guards gathered around the TV in the common area, watching the press conference. In her cell, Sarah sat on her bed, tears streaming down her face as she watched her husband risk everything for her. Back at City Hall, James revealed the preliminary findings of Rachel's investigation. Initial review shows that Judge Harrison has consistently given minorities sentences 3 to 4 times longer than those given to white defendants for the same crimes. This ends today. Reporters scribbled frantically, phones buzzed with breaking news alerts, and social media exploded with the revelation. In his chambers, Judge Harrison watched the press conference, his face growing paler with each word. "I am calling for an immediate review of all cases presided over by Judge Harrison," James announced. "And I am formally requesting that the State Judicial Review Board investigate his fitness to serve on the bench." He then spoke directly to the camera, his voice softening. "To our children watching at home, Michael, Lisa, and James, I'm sorry we had to hide our family for so long. But I'm not sorry for standing up for what's right. Your mother will come home." The questions came like a tsunami. Reporters shouted over each other, cameras clicked, and the room felt electric with energy. James answered each question calmly, revealing more details about their life together, about Sarah's case, and about the investigation into Harrison's past. In homes across the city, people watched their mayor transform from a political figure into a husband fighting for his wife. On social media, #JusticeForSarah and #InvestigateHarrison began trending. As the press conference ended, James walked off the stage knowing his life would never be the same. But as he checked his phone and saw a text message from Michael, "Dad, you are amazing. Mom would be proud," he knew he had made the right choice. The truth was finally out, and like a stone thrown into still water, its ripples would reach far beyond one family, one judge, or one city. The fight for justice was just beginning. The morning after Mayor Mitchell's revelation, veteran reporter Maria Santos sat at her desk at the Daily Chronicle, surrounded by old newspapers and dusty files. Her editor had given her one mission: dig deep into Judge William Harrison's past. 20 years as an investigative journalist had taught her that everyone had secrets. Judge Harrison, she would soon discover, had more than most. "You won't believe what I just found," said her young assistant Kevin, rushing to her desk with a stack of yellowed papers. They were membership records from an exclusive country club from the 1990s. Judge Harrison's name appeared not just as a member, but as board chairman during a time when the club openly refused membership to minorities. Maria adjusted her reading glasses and started typing on her computer. The story was coming together piece by piece, like a dark puzzle. Her phone buzzed constantly with tips from people who had encountered Harrison over the years. A retired courthouse clerk called with stories about Harrison's early days as a judge. He used to make racist jokes in his chambers. The clerk whispered, fear still in his voice after all these years. Nobody said anything because he had too much power. By midday, Maria's office wall looked like a detective's investigation board. Photos, newspaper clippings, and sticky notes connected Harrison's past activities with red string. The pattern was clear: decades of discrimination hidden behind a judge's robe. Look at this, Kevin said, pointing to his computer screen. He had found Harrison's college yearbook online. In it, a young Harrison posed proudly with a fraternity known for its racist policies. The caption under the photo read, "Keeping Traditions Alive." Maria's biggest breakthrough came when an anonymous email arrived. It contained scanned copies of private letters Harrison had written to various organizations in the 1980s. In one letter, he argued against integrating local schools. In another, he supported policies to keep certain neighborhoods pure. Print these, Maria told Kevin, her hands shaking slightly, and call Judge Harrison's office for comment. They need to know what's coming. At the courthouse, Harrison sat in his chambers, watching his career crumble. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since Mayor Mitchell's press conference. Now reporters were asking questions about his past that he had worked hard to keep buried. His secretary knocked on the door. "Sir, the Daily Chronicle is calling. They have some questions about your involvement with the Pine Valley Country Club in 1992. Harrison's face went pale. He remembered those board meetings, the votes to keep people out, the careful wording they used to hide their real reasons. He never thought those records would surface. Back at the Chronicle, Maria received more documents from other journalists joining the investigation. A reporter in Chicago found cases from Harrison's time as a lawyer, showing a pattern of taking cases that involved defending discriminatory practices. A journalist in Atlanta discovered his connections to organizations known for promoting racial segregation. Kevin rushed in again, this time with printouts from social media. People were sharing their own experiences with Harrison. A black law student described how Harrison had questioned her presence in his courtroom, assuming she was a defendant rather than a legal intern. A Hispanic attorney recalled Harrison mocking his accent during a trial. "We're ready to publish," Maria told her editor, laying out the evidence. "This goes beyond Sarah Thompson's case. Harrison has been using his power to hurt minorities for decades." The editor reviewed the story carefully. It would take up the entire front page of tomorrow's paper. The headline would read, "Judge Yee's Dark Past, 3 Decades of Discrimination Uncovered." As the story went to print, Maria looked out her office window at the courthouse across the street. Harrison was still inside, probably trying to figure out how to save his reputation. But the truth, hidden for so long, was finally breaking free. Her phone buzzed one last time that day. It was a text from Sarah Thompson's teenage son, Michael. He had found her number and sent a simple message. "Thank you for telling the truth about the man who took my mom away." Maria wiped a tear from her eye and began packing up her files. Tomorrow, the city would wake up to the full story of Judge Harrison's past. His carefully built image as a respected judge would crumble under the weight of his own prejudices. In her cell, Sarah Thompson slept peacefully that night, unaware that the next morning's newspaper would change everything. The truth, like sunlight, was about to disinfect decades of hidden darkness in their city's justice system. The morning after the Daily Chronicle's explosive story about Judge Harrison's past, the streets around the courthouse transformed into a sea of peaceful protesters. People from every neighborhood in the city gathered, holding signs that read "Justice for Sarah" and "No Room for Racist Judges." Reverend Marcus Johnson, a respected community leader, stood on the courthouse steps addressing the growing crowd. At 65, he had seen many protests, but this one was different. White, black, Hispanic, Asian, people from all backgrounds stood shoulder to shoulder. "Today, we aren't divided by race or wealth." His voice boomed through the megaphone. "We are united by something stronger, our demand for justice." Among the protesters, Michael Thompson Mitchell, Sarah's 14-year-old son, stood with his siblings and their grandmother. He held a sign showing a family photo with the words, "We need our mom home." News cameras focused on the children, their faces becoming powerful symbols of the injustice. Lisa Chen, a local restaurant owner, had closed her business for the day to join the protest. She handed out water bottles and sandwiches to protesters, remembering how Sarah used to come to her diner every morning for coffee before work. She always had a kind word for everyone, Lisa told a reporter. Now it's our turn to stand up for her. Inside City Hall, Mayor James Mitchell watched the gathering crowd from his window. His phone buzzed with messages of support from mayors across the country. Even the governor had called, expressing concern about the situation. "Sir," his assistant interrupted, "Reverend Johnson is here with some community leaders. They have a proposal." The meeting room quickly filled with religious leaders, civil rights activists, and business owners. They presented a united front, a citywide boycott of the judicial system until Harrison was removed and Sarah's case was reviewed. "We'll postpone all non-emergency cases," said attorney Mark Wilson. "Every lawyer who believes in justice will stand with us." At the county jail, Sarah watched the protests on TV in the common room. Other inmates gathered around her, offering support. Even the guards seemed different today, some quietly expressing their hope that she would get justice. Back outside, the crowd had grown to thousands. Students from local colleges arrived with new energy and creative signs. "Judge Harrison, history will judge you, and injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," bobbed above the crowd. Mrs. Peterson, Sarah's 70-year-old neighbor, sat in her wheelchair at the protest, holding a simple sign. "She was taking my heart medicine." Her presence touched hearts and reminded everyone that Sarah's crime was an act of kindness. Social media had exploded with support. #JusticeForSarah trended nationwide. Videos of the peaceful protests went viral. Celebrity activists shared the story, bringing national attention to the small city's fight for justice. Local businesses showed support in their own ways. The coffee shop where Sarah worked put up a huge "Preserved for Sarah" sign on her usual table. The hospital where she worked nights displayed a banner reading, "We stand with Sarah," across its entrance. As evening approached, the protest transformed into a candlelight vigil. Thousands of lights flickered in the growing darkness, each flame representing hope for change. Rabbi David Stern stood with Imam Ahmad Hassan and Reverend Johnson, their united presence sending a powerful message. "When justice sleeps," Rabbi Stern said to the crowd, "it's our duty to wake it up." The children started a simple chant that spread through the crowd, "Bring our mother home, bring our mother home." In his home, Judge Harrison watched the news coverage, his hands shaking as he poured another drink. His phone rang constantly, reporters, angry citizens, even old friends distancing themselves from him. The carefully built walls of his prejudiced world were crumbling. Mayor Mitchell ended the day by visiting the protesters. He walked among them not as a mayor, but as Sarah's husband, thanking them for their support. When he reached his children, he hugged them tightly, whispering, "Mom would be so proud of you all." As night fell, most protesters went home, but a dedicated group remained, promising to return every day until justice was served. They set up a rotation schedule, ensuring the courthouse steps would never be empty. The last image on the evening news showed Michael placing his protest sign at the courthouse steps. Next to it, he put a framed photo of his family's last Christmas together. The message was clear. This wasn't just about a legal case. This was about a family, a community, and a city's soul. The day ended, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring more supporters, more voices, and more determination to right a terrible wrong. The State Appeals Court building stood tall and proud in the morning sun. Inside Courtroom 3, every seat was filled as famous civil rights attorney Benjamin Carter prepared to present Sarah's appeal. His reputation for fighting injustice had earned him the nickname the Justice Warrior, and today he was working for free. "Your Honors," Carter began, his deep voice filling the courtroom. What happened in Judge Harrison's courtroom wasn't just a mistake, it was a crime against justice itself. The three appeals court judges leaned forward, listening carefully. Judge Maria Rodriguez, known for her fair rulings, studied the thick file of evidence before her. Judge Thomas Chen reviewed Harrison's past cases on his tablet. Judge Robert Wilson, the most senior member, watched Carter with intense focus. In the gallery, Mayor James Mitchell sat with his children. Michael, now missing 2 weeks of school, refused to stay home. Mom needs all of us here, he had insisted that morning. Rachel Chen, the district attorney, sat nearby, ready to present her own findings about Harrison's pattern of discrimination. Carter displayed a large screen showing statistics from Harrison's courtroom. Over 15 years, Your Honors, Judge Harrison sentenced minorities to terms averaging 312% longer than white defendants for identical crimes. This isn't coincidence. This is racism wearing a judge's robe. The evidence kept coming. Former clerks testified about Harrison's racist comments in chambers. Court records showed his systematic bias. The Daily Chronicle's investigation findings were entered into evidence, showing decades of discriminatory behavior. During a break, Sarah's mother spoke with reporters outside. My daughter was carrying my heart medicine, she said, her voice shaking. Now she faces life in prison while I have to raise her children. Where is the justice in that? Back inside, Carter played security footage from Harrison's courtroom. It showed his different treatment of defendants based on their race, smiling at some, scowling at others, rushing through some cases while taking time with others. And now, Carter said, reaching the heart of his argument, we come to Sarah Thompson's case. A loving mother, taking care of her elderly parent, sentenced to life imprisonment for carrying prescription medicine in the wrong bottle. This isn't justice. This is revenge against people Judge Harrison has always despised. Rachel Chen then presented her office's investigation. We reviewed every case Judge Harrison handled in the past 5 years, she explained to the appeals court. The pattern is undeniable. He weaponized his position to punish minorities. The prosecution, represented by State Attorney David Miller, offered little defense. While the sentence may seem harsh, he admitted, the state acknowledges serious concerns about Judge Harrison's pattern of behavior. During lunch break, protesters outside chanted peacefully. They had been there every day since Sarah's sentencing, their numbers growing. Today, they held signs reading "Justice delayed is justice denied" and "Free Sarah now." Back in session, Carter delivered his closing argument. Your Honors, this case is bigger than Sarah Thompson. It's about trust in our justice system. Every time Judge Harrison let his prejudice influence a sentence, he betrayed that trust. Today, you have the power to start fixing what he broke. The judges retired to deliberate. In the tense courtroom, Sarah's family held hands and prayed. Reporters scribbled in notebooks, waiting for history to happen. Even the usually busy courthouse cafeteria was quiet, everyone watching the news on their phones. After 2 hours, the judges returned. Judge Rodriguez, selected to deliver their decision, cleared her throat. This court has reviewed the evidence thoroughly, she began. The pattern of discriminatory sentencing by Judge Harrison is not just troubling, it is a direct violation of constitutional rights and judicial ethics. The room held its breath. We hereby vacate Sarah Thompson's sentence, Judge Rodriguez continued. Furthermore, we are ordering a review of all cases handled by Judge Harrison, with immediate priority given to currently incarcerated defendants. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Michael hugged his father, both crying openly. Rachel Chen smiled, knowing justice was finally being served. Additionally, Judge Rodriguez added once order was restored, we are referring Judge Harrison to the State Judicial Review Board for immediate suspension and investigation. Outside, the crowd of supporters burst into celebration when they heard the news. Church bells rang across the city. The Daily Chronicle's website crashed from too many people trying to read the breaking news. Carter packed his briefcase, satisfied. He had won many cases, but this one felt different. This wasn't just about one person's freedom. It was about changing a broken system. As the sun set on the courthouse, the news spread across the city. Sarah Thompson would be coming home. But everyone knew this was just the beginning. The fight for true justice was far from over. The day Sarah Thompson walked out of prison was sunny and bright. She stood at the gates, blinking in the sunlight, wearing the same navy blue dress she had worn to court 3 weeks ago. But this time, instead of fear in her eyes, there was joy. Mayor James Mitchell waited with their children, no longer hiding their relationship. Michael ran to his mother first, wrapping his arms around her. Lissette and young James followed, creating a family group hug that brought tears to the eyes of watching reporters. I love you all so much, Sarah whispered, holding her children tight. When she reached James, They shared their first public kiss as husband and wife, no longer bound by secrecy. Across town, Judge Harrison cleared out his chambers. The State Judicial Review Board had suspended him pending a full investigation. His face, once proud and arrogant, now showed the strain of his fall from power. As he packed his books, a group of protesters outside chanted, "Justice wins. Racism fails." At the Daily Chronicle, Maria Santos typed the final words of her latest article. Judge Harrison's resignation leads to review of 2,000 cases. Her investigation had helped uncover not just one wrong sentence, but 15 years of judicial misconduct that had hurt countless families. The mayor's office became a center of reform. James and Sarah worked together openly now, turning their painful experience into positive change. They established the Justice Reform Initiative, a program to review all cases where bias might have influenced sentencing. "Every person deserves fair treatment under the law," Sarah said at the initiative's launch ceremony. She stood at the podium, confident and strong. "What happened to me was terrible, but if it helps fix our broken system, then some good has come from it." The changes spread quickly. The state Supreme Court ordered mandatory bias training for all judges. New guidelines required regular reviews of sentencing patterns. Other cities began examining their own judicial systems, looking for similar problems. Sarah returned to her normal life, but things were different now. When she went back to her job at the diner, customers stood and applauded. At the hospital where she worked nights, her colleagues had organized a welcome-back party. Her story had touched people's hearts and opened their eyes. Michael, their oldest son, started a student group at his high school called Youth for Justice. They studied civil rights history and learned how to fight discrimination legally. "My mom taught me that standing up for what's right is worth any price," he told his classmates. The Thompson-Mitchell family moved into the mayor's residence together, no longer needing to hide their love. The first Sunday dinner as a public family was covered by local news. The image of Sarah serving her mother's favorite meal, surrounded by her loving family, became a symbol of justice restored. District Attorney Rachel Chen's office worked overtime, reviewing Harrison's old cases. Each day brought new stories of lives affected by his bias. One by one, unjust sentences were overturned. Families reunited. Wrongs were made right. The city changed too. People who had never thought about judicial bias before now paid attention to court proceedings. Community groups organized court-watching programs. Citizens demanded transparency from their judges. At the lake house where the family used to hide their weekends together, they now hosted public gatherings. Sarah started a support group for families affected by judicial bias. "We're not hiding anymore," she told them. "We're fighting for change together." 1 month after her release, Sarah stood again on the courthouse steps. This time, she wasn't a defendant but a speaker at a justice reform rally. Looking out at the crowd, she saw faces of all colors united in the cause of fairness. "My story had a happy ending," she said, her voice strong and clear. "But there are many others still waiting for justice. Our work isn't finished until every person who comes into these courts is judged by their actions, not their race." James watched his wife speak, proud of her strength and dignity. Their private love had become a public force for change. Their children sat nearby, no longer afraid to show the world who they were. As the sun set on the courthouse that evening, Sarah and James walked home hand in hand, their children running ahead. They passed the diner where she still worked morning shifts, a hospital where she still helped on nights, and the community center where she now taught others about their rights. The city had changed, a system had been shaken, justice had been restored, and a family that once hid in the shadows now walked proudly in the light, showing others the way toward a fairer future. "We did it," Sarah whispered to James as they reached home. "We really did it." "No," he replied, squeezing her hand. "We're just getting started."